This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Pro wrestling merchandise is now a carefully crafted science, but during the 80s and 90s, things are still taking off. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at rare pro wrestling figures that will blow your mind. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Wrestling's Greatest Moments knows that action figures are one of wrestling's most popular forms of merchandise. In fact, the sheer quantity is nothing short of astonishing, particularly some of the figures that were made in the late 1990s and onward. The 1980s and much of the 1990s didn't have as many though, which is why some of these figures may surprise you. Criteria. These are figures from the 80s and 90s that you'd be amazed to know were made. We're not looking at figures who are necessarily rare in the sense that they're worth a small fortune, but obscure wrestlers or ones that didn't seem like a high demand item that fans would want. These figures were made in the 80s and 90s, as opposed to re-releases or figures produced in the 21st century. We're also excluding figures from overseas, except for a couple UK exclusives, foreign promotions, and lawyer-friendly knockoffs. Gagne's Raiders 2-pack. Poor great Gagne, despite two solid runs with Jumping Jim Brunzell as the AWA's High Flyers, Gagne never found success afterward. Being a second or third generation wrestler can be tough, especially when you're working in your father's promotion. Nonetheless, you can't say the AWA didn't try to get Greg over, including an unusual pairing with Sergeant Slaughter that saw the Sarge subject Gagne to a special boot camp designed to transform him into a lean, mean fighting machine a la John Candy in stripes. The result was a laughable look for Gagne that featured him attired in camouflage. While wrestling's greatest moments would like to think that we've seen it all, the great Gagne, Curt Hennig, Gagne's Raiders tag team is something we never even heard of until we produced this video. Interestingly, we haven't been able to track down any instances where Gagne and the future Mr. Perfect competed as Gagne's Raiders, although they did team together in the 1980s. There are many possible explanations, including that these figures were a marketing ploy to cash in on the success of G.I. Joe toys, or a planned idea that never made it to the ring. Considering Verne Gagne booked a country music act for his Wrestle Rock Stadium show, your guess is as good as anyone's. This 2-pack was part of Remco's AWA line. Although Verne Gagne is often criticized for being out of touch in the 1980s, his decision to license AWA wrestlers into action figures suggests old Verne still has some good ideas. The Wrestle Rock Shuffle not being one of them. Dick Woehrle referee figure. While some fans might argue a wrestling referee figure is unnecessary, especially if you're on a limited budget and want an actual wrestler, there's something to be said for meeting the demand of completists who want a referee to make the 3 count, take a convenient bump so a heel could interfere, and of course miss flagrant cheating. In Remco's case, it didn't bother with a generic referee, but went with legendary territory-era referee Dick Woehrle. Woehrle became the WWF and WWF's best recognized referee, working in the 1960s, 1970s, and mid-1980s before he left the WWF. For fans looking to buy a referee action figure, as opposed to buying an actual referee as Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase did, why settle for a generic one when a name brand is available? Corporal Kirchner. Corporal Kirchner is an example of how the WWF found out that replacing wrestlers wasn't as easy as it looked. For example, Vince McMahon seemed to think that a tall blonde wrestler, Dan Spivey, could take Barry Windham's place in the U.S. Express. This wasn't McMahon's only attempt, as he tried replacing Sergeant Slaughter with Corporal Kirchner, who had the military credentials to portray a patriot, but who just couldn't get over in Slaughter's place. Nonetheless, the WWF gave him the action figure treatment, and Corporal Kirchner honored action figure immortality as one of the WWF's line of action figures from LJN. Fans will remember these wrestlers not only for being immobile, but for being solid enough to use as real-life foreign objects. Big Josh. Nowadays, fans can buy wrestlers from just about any era, but during the 1980s, and to a lesser extent the 1990s, not everyone got a figure. That's why WCW's decision to license a Big Josh figure is so interesting. Josh, aka territory star Matt Borne, played a rugged outdoorsman who helped out WCW's babyfaces and even held secondary titles. However, the decision to make a figure of him is odd in that his tag team partner Tommy Rich, a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, had no action figure. Indeed, there are no figures of Rich besides a pint-sized edition by Pro Wrestling Loot. The Big Josh figure is reportedly in high demand, so if you have one in original packaging, look it up. Outback Jack. Outback Jack epitomized the WWF's character creation policy during the rock and wrestling era. Throw something against the wall and see if it sticks. Here, the WWF sought to capitalize on the popularity of the Crocodile Dundee films and Americans' fascination with Australia. Vince McMahon probably had cartoon dollar bill signs in his eyes when he brought Outback Jack into the WWF, with fans subjected to endless hype videos for the burly Australian. Unfortunately, Jack got over like Weekend at Bernie's 2. Nonetheless, the WWF commissioned a figure of him, and it was released in 1987, just in time to be used as a gift for clueless relatives who figured any wrestler would do, or for wrestling-savvy parents who wanted an eco-friendly substitute for coal. Clarence Mason. Everyone despises attorneys, at least until they need one, which is why it's surprising that there aren't more attorney characters in wrestling. Regardless, the WWF created Clarence Mason to serve as the Nation of Domination's legal, and despite a short run in the Fed, there's actually an action figure of him. You'll have to buy a multi-pack to get him though. Mason is available in a 2-pack with Crush and a Nation of Domination 4-pack with Farouk, Crush, and Savio Vega. Commissioner Michaels. Shawn Michaels had several action figures before Shawn had to retire from what appeared to be a career-ending injury. Knowing that the Heartbreak Kid still had value as a personality, the WWF made him WWF Commissioner. That job just didn't pan out, but the WWF created a Commissioner Michaels action figure, likely hoping they could cash in on the Heartbreak Kid's popularity. Nailz. Vince McMahon had to be kicking himself in the pants when he saw this toy hit the shelves, especially after Nailz allegedly manhandled him over some money backstage in an infamous incident. Nailz, who portrayed a former convict seeking revenge on the Big Boss Man from the Boss Man's days, keeping an eye on the inmates at Conn College, didn't last long in the WWF. Skinner. Although some wrestling fans were disappointed that Steve Keirn's WWF run, A Gator Hunter, at least they didn't have to see him working his final years playing a former plumber, T.L. Hopper, or hockey player, the Goon. Keirn can also boast that he had an action figure made celebrating his most successful run in wrestling as one half of the Fabulous Ones. The Fabs were one of several teams issued by Remco and their AWA line. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. There are many Ricky Steamboat action figures, as there should be, but this one almost seems like a Vince McMahon rib as it depicts Steamboat in the ridiculous outfit that WWF put him in during his return to the company. You'll probably recall Steamboat made the mistake of asking for time off to witness the birth of his son after he won the Intercontinental Championship, which led to Vince yanking the title off the Dragon and scaling back his push. Fans can talk about how much Vinnie Mac humiliated Dusty Rhodes by putting him in polka dots, but this outfit wasn't much better, as Steamboat looked like a cast-off from a cheap carnival. Sergeant Craig Pittman. Retired Marine turned pro wrestler Craig Pittman didn't win any gold during his run in WCW from 1993 to 1997. Sergeant Pittman seemed like WCW's attempt to recreate a Sergeant Slaughter character for the 1990s. Like many characters during this period, Sergeant Pittman didn't find much success outside the mid-card. But thousands of years from now, archaeologists will wonder just why so many people kept idols of Pittman in their homes to worship. 1988 WWF LJN Wrestling Superstars Value Pack, Special Delivery Jones, and Kamala. SD Jones remains one of wrestling's fan-favorite jobbers. Nevertheless, it's incredible how many action figures the WWF commissioned for him during its LJN run. LJN made a SD Jones figure, which makes sense if you want a squash match, and even a variant, with SD attired in his colorful West Indies outfit. Not only that, but there's a 2-pack featuring Kamala and SD. While it seems like it would have been more appropriate to do a 2-pack of SD and King Kong Bundy to recreate Bundy squashing SD at WrestleMania, It doesn't take away from SD's accomplishment of 3 different figures. Kurrgan. WWF fans have many great memories from the Attitude Era, including its different factions. However, for every D-Generation X, there were 3 or 4 duds like the Truth Commission. Still, it was hard to ignore the group's big man Kurrgan. Kurrgan lasted longer than the Truth Commission, joining the oddities, and along the way, he even got an action figure. He's also featured in a 3-pack alongside Stone Cold Steve Austin and Droz. The Blue Bloods. Although Bobby Eaton is no longer with us, his legacy remains as a wrestler's wrestler and a wonderful human being. Incredibly, beautiful Bobby didn't get an action figure until WCW's Blue Bloods. The wrestling gods later saw fit to honor beautiful Bobby's career in the Midnight Express with the action figure treatment. Can you believe some of these wrestlers had action figures? Or that known wrestlers had action figures made in their lesser known personas? Are there any we missed? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.